Nick Clegg squirms as Facebook apologist-in-chief. Sound familiar? Ooh. Now, for the record, when Nick Clegg stepped down as leader of the Liberal Democrats, he did say something quite poignant. I thought was quite good, and he said that he sort of spoke out against the politics of fear, which is good because the politics of fear is used by all political parties in this country, by both main ones especially. Different forms of fear. Whether you have the fear, it's always the fear of the other, no matter who that other is. And fear is always used to control us. So it's starting to sound like, if you just joined, this is not some conspiracy show. Well, it is. This isn't. But it is the politics of fear. It's constantly used. It's always been used. Fear lasts longer than love, wrote Machiavelli. That actually used to be the slogan for one of my businesses. Obviously, wasn't the right slogan for a yogurt company, but well, you live and you learn. So I respected him for speaking out and saying that, because it is used against us. There was the fear of Islam, and now the new fear of the rise of white supremacy. That I swear actually doesn't exist. But there you go. You got to be scared of someone, because someone needs to hold your hand across the road. That's what politicians do, and that's what the media tells you as well. But anyway, I respected him for that. Just to give you some clarification on what I feel for Nick Clegg, with my Nick Clegg pillow that I cuddle every night. I don't have much opinion of him apart from that. So the former deputy PM is used to taking the rap for unpopular policies, but the Facebook gig could be a poison chalice. Now, what is this Facebook gig that he's got? I don't know. Once upon a time, there was a Tumblr account called Nick Clegg Looking Sad. Well, it would be on Tumblr, wouldn't it? And you would know it was on Tumblr, wouldn't you? Blah blah blah. Let's not read that bit. It's boring. It doesn't seem to have been updated since the 2015 general election, presumably because that represented peak misery. But I was reminded of it on Tuesday when Nick Clegg made his first outing as spin doctor for Facebook. That is an official title. Facebook spin doctor. Is that his title? He had been given some happy news to impart, including the creation of a centre of electoral integrity to try to fight political disinformation campaigns aimed at skewing elections. Now, no one would accuse any British newspaper or any British news outlet of doing that. It's only Facebook that does that. Only Facebook that does that. You wouldn't catch the Daily Mail or the Guardian doing such things, would you? No, you wouldn't, would you? No, of course not. Alright, but the pained expression crept in when confronted on TV with examples of the kind of graphic Instagram post that 14-year-old Molly Russell's bereaved parents believed had bearing on their daughter's suicide, and asked whether he would want his own children to see them. There's something horribly familiar about the sight of Clegg publicly squirming over the consequences of things he doesn't quite have the power to stop, as if the coalition years were happening all over again in slow motion. Former party leaders have to do something with the rest of their lives. Yep. But the sight of a former Deputy Prime Minister spinning for Mark Zuckerberg feels none the less symbolic of everything that is wrong with the relationship between big tech and politics. Well, there is something wrong with the relationship between big tech and politics, but it probably isn't entirely what you're going to be aiming, what you're going to be, what's the word? Going to be insinuating, I suppose, or putting across. Clegg used to help run the country, and now Facebook seems to be running him. And that really, is that really the way it's meant to work? It's a job, mate. Come on. There has been a revolving door between Whitehall and Silicon Valley for many years now, with a steady stream of former special advisors being snapped up by the Googles and the Ubers and the Facebooks. We're calling things plural now. It makes sense on one level. Both politics and tech are bewilderingly fast-moving, complex. Politics is not fast-moving. It's not complex. With a significant impact on already lives, only if you choose to let it do so. Right, so look at this. The single biggest threat to the seemingly unstoppable rise of tech oligarchs would be government with teeth, prepared either to regulate platforms more strictly or to tax them more heavily. These companies, like any other company, will naturally seek to anticipate and, where possible, frustrate any political threat to their business model, obviously. So the obvious way of doing that is by hiring people with understanding of and preferably influence over the political process. But the Facebook empire, and we know who Facebook owns, so I'm not going to read it, now has a broader reputational problem too. Even if it could square off the politicians, its own users don't like what they are hearing about everything from invasions of their personal privacy to toxification of public debate and the role of social media and fueling the rise of far-right movements. Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Obviously, Facebook has fueled the rise of the invisible far-right. Well done. Facebook seems to be trying to engage directly with the public. It's a risk for both sides. Politicians are used to articulating their own views, not parroting other people's, and it may take Clegg a while to get used to answering questions about the limits of regulation in Zuckerberg's voice rather than his own. But the bigger reputational risk is perhaps to Clegg personally, and by association the Liberal Democrats in general, whose members care more than most about questions of privacy, freedom of speech and civil liberties. He has presumably gone in believing that Facebook really does want to be a force for good now. No, I think it's just a job. This guy's written this article and it hasn't really said it. Again, another opinion piece that doesn't say anything, really. This says very little. What does it say about Nick Clegg? What does it actually say about him and this role at Facebook? Does it go into what he's going to do? I have no idea what he's doing. Do they know what he's doing there? What his role is there? What is his role there? His first outing. So what is his first outing? To do what? Facebook to create war room to fight fake news, Nick Clegg says. So the company's incoming communications chief. So he's a communications chief for Facebook. Is that just for Britain? Or is that for the world? I wouldn't think it was for the world. But the thing is what it's sort of alluding to here, I find problematic. And this is going to be a huge problem. So the single biggest threat to seemingly unstoppable rise of the tech oligarchs would be a government with teeth prepared either to regulate platforms more strictly or to tax them more heavily. Now leave Facebook aside, yeah. The problems with Facebook and Twitter is something that governments should be consulting psychologists about. They need to speak to experts, like real experts, on how this stuff affects the general consciousness of people, because it isn't doing many people any good. And if you look at how the narcissism of Instagram affects people, how the short-lived lifespan of a tweet affects people, the Twitter hate mob mentality, the fact that Facebook relies on if you've ever looked into social media marketing, anything you put on Facebook, you have to have a headline grabber, a grabbing headline, because it has to take, in order for them to leave Facebook, it needs to be something worth them clicking on and leaving Facebook. So the headlines are hyperbolic and really sensational, really clickbaity and misleading. And a lot of times people just read headlines and that's it, don't read the rest of it. So you read this bit and maybe a bit of this bit and a little bit of that bit, and that's you done. And that's all the information you have. And usually headlines, and you're all guilty of this, you motherfuckers, and you know this because you're in the game. And it leads to disinformation. It leads to just the further dumbing down of humanity. This is something I will talk about quite a lot because it's part of what's going on. But in order to get to the bottom of how to curb this nonsense that's been spugged into our brains, and it's not just the rise of the far right, it's the rise of the far left as well. Let's not sugarcoat all of this. Like the far left is far more crazy. The far right is almost non-existent because they don't have any real influence. Like there's no far right policies in place, really. You don't get far right groups hounding people on social media, and to an extent that they lose right. You might get far right people that will hound people with abuse and so forth, but they don't get people sacked. They don't get people removed from positions. They don't wield that kind of power. What far right groups do, the ones that do exist, so say you've got your Britain First or whatever, who are a tiny minority, all they will do is go on silly marches and just piss people off on, for a few hours of the day when they just march around with their crosses and stuff, being weirdos. Whereas the far left will actively get policies changed, and get people arrested and like all kinds of and get them fired, But it's all problematic. And the only way you're going to solve that is they're going to have to legitimately consult with psychologists, like experts in the field on how social media is affecting us and what can be done to curb it. Now, and then on the other hand, so put Facebook aside, and then you've got Google, which has information by the balls. And I found it increasingly concerning about how you search for information on Google. Some statistics you can't find because you have to go deep, because the way the algorithms changed on Google considerably. You talk to people who do SEO, so search engine optimization, and how it used to be done is totally different to how it's done now. So you can't land on the fucking top search or on page 1 or page 2 of Google, where most people are going to look for their information, without meeting certain criterias. And it's a mind fuck. If you want me to go into it sometime, I will. But you'll have to look into it yourself and see if you understand it. As in, you've got people who worked in SEO for years now don't fully understand it and having to relearn it. So the point is, in order to find information on Google, it's become a term, and we're all guilty of it, saying just Google it. But the problem is that Google doesn't always give you what you need or what you should have. And Google have a monopoly on business. So any small business, Google Ads is fantastic. It's very efficient. It's cost effective. It's the best way one of the best way to advertise. If you've got a small business, very cost effective. But so many people use Google Ads, from the smallest to the biggest. You can compete against. You can have your own Coke. You can have your own cola that you just make in your garage, and you can compete. You can compete for certain keywords. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes you'll get above Coca-Cola if you're lucky in people searching for cola to buy online or whatever. So you and the big boys are all grouped together, and Google has got you all by the balls. So obviously Coca-Cola has more reach beyond that. But you see what I'm saying? As in, they have too much control over how people advertise, over business, as in a company with very particular set of values. These companies with a very particular set of values in this very insular area of Northern California, where they all think the fucking same, but they are basic megalomaniacs disguised as virtuous angels, have way too much control on commerce in a country they may have never been to. That's a fucking problem. That is a problem, and a control over information. Now, on the one hand, you don't want that to be the case, but on the other hand, you don't want to give the government too much power to regulate this and start tearing into them, because we want the internet to be free. We want the dream to stay alive, man. You don't want the government meddling too much. So we have to do something first. Because when you have to get the government involved, and probably eventually that's what's going to happen, you don't want to give them too much free reign of power over this thing that they got nothing to do with, basically. So it is problematic. And talking about, so I think this Molly Russell thing is someone who found stuff on Instagram to help her commit suicide. It's like, that kind of stuff's been around for a long time. You've also got idiot friends, and if you're gonna do it, you're gonna do it, I suppose. But that's not what I'm talking about. But it's very, it's very rich of the Guardian. They are somebody just fully against Facebook, because they think Facebook caused Brexit. They think Facebook caused Donald Trump to get in power. It took a lot more than that, my friends, for that shit to happen. You can't put it all down to Facebook and supposed Russian bots, because there's plenty of disinformation on the other side being spread around. Okay, it's like, what is it? It's just whose disinformation succeeds. You're all guilty. You're all guilty of being hyperbolic. You're all guilty of pushing narratives, twisting facts, leaving out facts, and generally being a bunch of cunts. You're all guilty, and you've all used Facebook to peddle your smut. So, don't be having a go at Facebook. And I can't believe I'm defending Facebook, because it is the all-seeing eye of evil. But, fucking pull the other one.